Hello, Rick Tryon with BibleRebel.com. And this is the 7th video in our Bible 101 series. In our previous video, we started talking about the different keys and tips and tools you can use to better understand the Bible when you read and study it. And we went over the context, how context is important, and the three different kinds of context. So in that last video, we talked about the historical, cultural context and how when you read the Bible, that you shouldn't read our modern understanding into it, our modern ideas and understanding into the Bible, because it is, after all, an ancient book, and we have to understand it the way the people in the time and culture in which it was written in the various places, how they would have understood it. So that was the historical, cultural context aspect of it. The other two context aspects that we raised in our previous episode and that we're going to talk about today together are the biblical and spiritual context. And you have to know where in the Bible you are when you're reading it in order to understand it. For instance, we discussed in the basic divisions of the Bible previously that there's an Old Testament and a New Testament, an Old Covenant and a New Covenant. So the Old Testament is Genesis through the book of Malachi, and the New Testament, the New Covenant, is Matthew through the book of Revelation. So you have to know where you're at in the Bible when you're reading it. If you're in the Old Testament, it's going to have some different nuances of understanding and things you need to understand in that broad context. And when you're in the New Covenant, the New Testament, likewise. So getting the basic theme of where you're at in the Bible is very important in order to understand it. So in the Old Testament, that's before Jesus. The New Testament is after Jesus, or during his life and after Jesus. So in the Old Testament, when you're reading some of those books, understand the context of some of those divisions and books in the Old Testament. For instance, the theme of Exodus is the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. So when you read that book, when you're reading a passage out of Exodus, the book of Exodus, you have to understand that the basic theme of that is leading the children out of slavery in Egypt and going into the promised land, getting to the promised land. Likewise, Genesis is about beginnings. And there are the prophets, for instance, Isaiah and Jeremiah. Those are prophecies about the children of Israel and what their future looks like and how they've, in various times and ways, sort of disobeyed God. So understanding the general theme of a book is really important to understand it as you read it. In the New Testament, the New Covenant, understanding the theme of, like, the book of Matthew. It's about the life of Jesus. So when you're reading the book of Matthew, you're reading about the life of Jesus. You understand that basic context. When you read in the book of Revelation, the general theme and context of that is, end times, or how God is going to consummate his plan. So you don't want to take and read into, for instance, the book of Romans, something of the context of an Old Testament book of Exodus. So know where you're at in the Bible and know the general theme of the subject matter of what you're reading. And that will help you a lot to understand it. In the Old Testament, you're basically going to have the law, the prophets, and some of the other writings. And so you don't want to take something, for instance, out of Leviticus, which covers temple laws and all kinds of hundreds of different laws that sort of govern the way the children of Israel and the Jewish people, lived back in the day. You can't take that and bring that into a book in the New Testament. So just understanding the basic idea of context is very important. And then spiritual context. And the spiritual context is, are we before Jesus Christ or after Jesus Christ, or during his life. His death and resurrection and ascension and eventual return are a spiritual context that we read about in, for instance, Romans through Thessalonians, the Pauline epistles. That's the spiritual context. We don't live under the law of the Old Testament like in Exodus and Leviticus. That's a different spiritual context than what we have in the New Testament, and especially in the epistles after the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then the epistles. So understanding that context is really important. And then one last point on context, that we don't want to get in the habit of taking a verse, just isolating a verse from anywhere in the Bible, or a small passage, and then just magnifying that on its own. You have to understand the verse or a passage from the Bible in the broader context of where it's written in order to really get the meaning of it. So that's a little bit about the biblical and spiritual context of where you're at in the Bible. Know where it is. Know what sort of the grand theme of the book or passage or section you're reading is to better understand it. Next time, we're going to get into some practical tools like concordances and some other study guides and aids to help us understand the Bible better. So we'll see you then. Thanks.